Okay, so we're back for round two. So I see the AWS server is up. That's great. I think what we'll do, we'll keep working locally for now. I want to change partway through, and then once we have everything done that we want to do today, we can then migrate it to AWS and host our publish our pages through Filezilla, kind of at the end once this is all working. And that will require us to rerun the database tables and repopulate them, which is fine, not a big deal. Okay, so we've built our genres page. This page isn't really all that useful for the moment. It's just to see our list, but we want to take this list, run a similar query, but we want to inject it, as Tyler suggests, we want to inject it into our artist details form. And then we want to modify the save page so that we can also save the genre along with an artist. So we're going to go to our artist details page. And again, all the code we've done so far today, it is on GitHub. You can find that link on D2L under tools and resources if you need it. So we're going to go to the artist details page that we created last week. We'll create a new field set. And we'll create a label for genre ID. Which will be 2 columns wide, so it'll be the same width as our previous label, and it'll say genre. Now we want a drop-down tag here. We don't want to use a regular input because that's just a text field where the user types. Does anybody know what HTML tag we need to generate a drop-down list? Give you a hint, it's not drop-down. Aha, select. Thank you, Tawani. So we'll add a select tag. Now here's one of the most common errors with select tags. People forget they still need a name attribute. If we don't give it a name, we won't be able to access the selection the user made on our save page. We're going to give it a name and ID of genre ID. So if I go and refresh my artist details, we should now have a second field set, and there's going to be an empty drop-down list here. So what we want to do is use our database query to fill this drop-down with all of the genres. So in between my opening and closing select tags, we're going to write a block of PHP code. And this code is going to be very similar to what we did on the genres page. Right, so I'm just opening these inside the select tag. So almost all of this code we're going to repeat. The only thing that's different is we're not going to use UL or LI to wrap or package up the data. We're going to use different HTML, but all this stuff's going to be the same. So I'm going to connect. I know you're probably starting to get tired of typing this. That's okay. It means you're learning it. We will kind of make this scalable shortly, so you don't have to keep typing this stuff over and over again. We're going to run the exact same query, select star genres. Again, just like every other call to our database, we're going to create a command variable and prepare our connection to use our SQL. So again, exactly the same as what we've done on all our other pages. Execute the query. And call fetch all to get the query results stored into a local array. And again, we'll use the same loop that we used before. At the bottom, I'll disconnect. So we know we're going to use an echo. So this code is basically identical to our last page. Like I said, this stuff's actually repetitive. It's not magic. We do the same things over and over again. We're going to use an echo command here. What kind of tags do we need inside of the select so that each genre name becomes a new item in the list? It's not an LI tag. A different kind of HTML tag. Thank you, Akeem. So we're going to echo out an opening option tag. And then we are going to append on. So our genre name will get inserted or concatenated between an opening and a closing option tag. We will need to do one more thing with this, but this is almost complete. So inside the loop, we're using option and end option tags as the packaging or the formatting to display our genre names. So I'll hop over to the browser for a second, we'll check it out, make sure it looks right. There is one little adjustment, one more addition this is going to need. It's going to look okay. Cool, so there's our drop down. Some of you might still have an empty drop down. If you have an empty drop down, if you right click and choose view page source, you'll probably see an error in red. So somehow your query result is failing or there's a syntax error. You'll actually see that because we've embedded the PHP in here. But you won't see the error on your page because the PHP is nested inside that select tag. So we're going to make one small addition to this option tag. We want the users to see the genre names, but when we save an artist to the database, if we go and look at the structure of the artist table that we just built, so when we rebuilt our artist, notice our genre, we've got the genre ID and it's an integer. How come? I know you'll talk about this more in your database class. Maybe you've already started talking about this. Why are we going to store the genre as an integer and store the ID? Why don't we store the genre name along with each artist? Yeah, let's see, it's the primary key, right? The primary key values never change. They're unique and they never change. The genre names technically might be duplicated and they could be modified, but the IDs can't be modified. So we want to use the primary key value here as our foreign key. So to do this, even though our options, they display the name in text, we want to actually use the genre ID as the value. The values, they're hidden from our users. They don't see them, but we're actually going to save the ID number instead. So our tag's going to get a little messy here. Value equals, and then a double quote and single quote. I will copy and paste this in the chat. And then we're going to append on the genre ID. And then single quote, double quote. So the users don't see the IDs. They only see the genre names, but behind the scenes in code, the actual value will be the ID number instead. So we can save the primary key rather than saving that text repeatedly. If it's all on one line, then somehow probably the closing tag is not being appended on properly. Make sure you got a slash there. Bless you, I've just pasted that whole line in the chat so you can compare your line with mine. Probably just a small syntactical problem. So if I refresh now, visually we don't see anything different. But if I view the source, I don't think I saved the change yet. So now when I refresh and view the source, you can see that the drop-down, each option is storing the appropriate ID. So the users, they don't care about the IDs. We don't need to show them. I mean, I'll show you in a real site, for example, how this looks. So here on, you guys I know aren't using Blackboard, but so when I post an item to Blackboard, if I want to copy it or move it to another course, I get a drop-down list, right? So this page is querying the database, and it doesn't show all the courses. It's filtering. It shows all the courses I have access to in Blackboard. Right? I see the course names. I don't see the course IDs or the CRNs. But if I inspect this element, you can see the options have an ID value here. They display the readable text that's meaningful, but it's using the ID behind the scenes when I pick a course. So we're doing the same. If you don't get a drop down at all, then you must be missing your select tags. Or if you are saying you don't have a drop down or you have no items in the drop down. If you don't have any items in the drop down, there's probably an error in your PHP code. Do you have a select tag? So notice on line 19, I've got select. That creates a drop-down control. So you may be missing that tag. There you go. The double quote, single quote. Yeah, it's no, Tyler, it's you're talking about on line 29? No, the double quotes are because this is an HTML, this is just an HTML tag, and attribute values should always be enclosed in double quotes for properly formatted HTML. So we want, notice wherever we've got attributes of an HTML tag, they're always enclosed in double quotes. So I'm using that because we've got a value attribute for the option tag, and those values should be enclosed in double quotes. So I'm single quoting the strings so I can insert these double quotes inside. So so that my HTML is properly formatted. It will work without the double quotes, but it's not considered best practice for HTML. So attribute values should always be enclosed in double quotes. Did I answer your question? So I'm using single quotes around the literals, and I'm using double quotes around my HTML attribute values. So now we need to modify our save page, because our save artist page, right now, it only saves the artist name. So this is going to throw an error because we said the genre ID isn't null. Great. That's good, Raj. Right? If I try and add an artist, I'm going to get this, right? An integrity constraint violation. I can't add a row because my foreign key constraint fails, right? My save page right now is not saving the genre ID. It's only saving the name, but the genre ID is required. So this error is to be expected. So now we need to go to the artist details page and we need to add in the genre ID into the whole save process. So I'm going to open up the save artist page we made last week. On line 10, we are reading the name input into a name variable. So I'm going to create a genre ID. Again, this stuff is case sensitive. I had a bunch of people struggle with this morning because either they had a capital D or a lowercase I. So I'm using camel case for consistency. So not only are we grabbing the name from the form post, we're also grabbing the genre ID. So that is the drop-down selection. What is the next line we need to change? We need to change one additional line and add one additional line. What line should we change? Thank you, Akeem. So in the query, we also need to add the genre ID as well as a second parameter in camel case, which will be colon genre ID. That's line 19 for me. So again, we're adding on the genre ID in our insert statement. And we need to add one new line. What do we add and where are we going to put it? Pardon me. Thank you, Akeem. If we're going to set out two parameters, we need two bind param statements. I'm just going to try the page without it to show you what happens, because I guarantee you every one of you is going to get this error. People got it this morning in my class. Everyone is going to get this error at some point. I'm just going to go back. I'm going to resubmit now. And notice now I get a different error. You are all going to get this error. Invalid parameter number, the number of bound variables does not match the number of tokens. What this means is that the number of parameters in the SQL query does not match the number of bind param statements. These always have to match. If there's two parameters, we need two bind param statements, as Akeem pointed out. I only have one, so this is the error, invalid parameter number. When you see this, the solution is go count the number of parameters in your SQL statement and count the number of bind param statements. It means those numbers are mismatched. So I'm going to again bind my genre ID. I'm going to bind the parameter. to our genre ID variable that we've declared here. So I'm going to save that change, and now I should be able to try again. So I'm going to go back one more time. I can just refresh and try to resend my form post for the third time. And now it tells me my artist was saved. If we want to check it, I can go and peek at my SQL workbench and see if there is an artist record there. I'm just going to hop over to Workbench. I'm going to query my artist table. And now I've got all-time low in as with genre ID 2. I could go and add some other artists and try some other genres. I'll add a few records. I'll run my query again. So we can see our artist form and save pages are working, and they're now including, notice when I picked a different genre for Miles Davis, I got genre ID 3. Go back and so now I should have at least one artist in each genre. Okay, if you're getting that error, the genre ID, it's not, what that is suggesting is when you go to save to fill the genre ID from your variable, it's saying it's null. So there's two possible causes for this. If you're getting an error saying that the genre ID is missing, it means either you have misspelled something here, it's not reading, or you have misspelled or omitted the name property from your select tag. So in your artist details, you have either misspelled or are missing the name attribute. Because it's telling, that error is saying there is no genre, there's no value from the form called genre ID. Okay, there we go, Mike. So Mike got the error, invalid parameter number. Right? So Mike, you want to be checking that you have two parameters in your insert statement, each one prefixed with a colon, and you have two bind param statements, one for each variable. Yep. Okay, you know what, it's good. These are common errors. We're all going to do it. So we have these errors. That's how we'll learn, right? Okay, Jack, you are not getting any errors, but nothing shows up. Okay. So Jack, make sure you have this line here, this set attribute, this line 16. This should show, by default, PDO does not show errors. So if there's a database operation with PDO that fails, you might just get a blank screen. So make sure you've included this set attribute. This enables PDO debugging. That should give you more info. Are we going to add, okay, well, Alex, we don't want to link to the save artist page because you can't go there directly, right? The only way you can go to save artist, if I go to save artist, right, I can't just go here and link to it because it's missing the post fields. The only way to call the save page is via the form. You have to go to the details page and submit the form. So we're never going to link directly to our save page. we'll add links to the form, and the form calls the save page. Are we going to check if a genre already exists? We probably could do that, but not today. Yeah, Mike, the casing is really critical, right? That's why you need to be consistent with your casing, and why I recommend, at least in this class, use camel case for everything. Okay, you have insert value list does the column count doesn't match value count. That suggests a syntax error in your SQL statement. So check your SQL statement carefully. There should be 2 columns separated with a comma, 2 parameters separated with a comma. Sure, I can push up to Git. Save artist with genre. Right. Okay, I've pushed to Git, so if you need to compare your work to what I've done, it's on Git now. So we're going to make one more page. Good, we got lots of stuff. We're going to make one more page. We want to display all the artists on a page as an HTML table. And then we're going to migrate everything over to AWS and publish this all to the web server. And that'll mean recreating our database tables in the AWS MySQL server. And then I'll give you lab 1. So I'm going to make one more page for today. We'll call it artists. So it's plural with an S on the end, artists.php. I'll put my boilerplate HTML, so you could even go to the artist details. You could even copy everything from the body up. I'll just copy my first 9 lines and paste those into my new artists page. And I can just close the body. And I'll just change the heading to say artists. So on this page, we want to do similar things that we've done with our last 2 pages with genres. We want to connect to the database. We want to query the artist table to fetch all the data. We want to loop through it, but this time we want to create a grid. So something like, from a format perspective, instead of a list, we want a table. Maybe we want to show the artist name and the genre. Later on, we'll show a thumbnail of the photo. So we'll put on an H1 here that says artists. And we're going to use an HTML table. We'll style it. Actually, yeah, we could style it. We use the Bootstrap table class. And then we'll create a header for the table with column headings. And then we'll create a table body, and we'll use a loop in PHP code to output each artist as a new row in the table. So TR is table row, TH stands for table heading. So we'll have 2 headings. We want to show the artist name and we want to show the genre. Will look like this so far. So it just looks like this. By using the table class, it will span the full width of the page. Then we'll add a key body section, and our PHP code is going to live here. We want to go and fetch the list of artists and use a loop to display the artist name here and the genre. For the moment, we're going to display the genre ID. Later on, we'll change it in another class to display the genre name. But for today, we'll keep it simple. We'll just show the artist name and the genre ID. So our PHP code block can go inside our table body. Connect, set up and run query, move to results and display inside table cells. So our process here is going to be, again, similar to what we've already done. Same connection, same structure for our query, same for each loop. The only thing that's really different, again, is going to be what HTML are we wrapping or using to format that database content. We've used UL and LIs on our genres page. We've used select and option tags on our artist details. Now we're going to use TRs and TDs in a table rows and table data or columns. So we'll connect. We'll write our query. So the other two queries we've written, we've been selecting from the genres table, but this time we want to show the artists. So the SQL is the same, except the table name that we're querying is different. Later on, if we want to show the genre name, we'll need to do a multi-table query with a join. So we'll leave that for a bit later. So some of this stuff might be starting to look familiar because we're doing it over and over again. We're going to prepare our command. We'll execute our query. And again, we'll call fetch all. This time I'm going to call my array artists because it describes the data we're working with. So usually if I select from the artist table, I'll call my array, I'll give it the same name. Whoops. Down at the bottom, we can disconnect. So now we're going to use the same loop structure. So for each artist, we want to create one new row. So we're going to have an opening TR and a closing TR. That opens and closes a new row in the table. And then within each row, we want two sets of TD tags. TD stands for table data, and it represents a cell inside of a table. So we'll start with a TR, which I'll break up into multiple lines. Then we'll have a TD. And in the first cell, I'm going to create a new row, create a new cell, insert the artist name in the new cell, and then close it. I then want to create a second column. For now, we're just going to show, for simplicity, the genre ID. So the mechanics of our loop, it's exactly the same. Connect, run a query, store the results, loop through them, and display inside the loop, use echo with some kind of HTML formatting. In this case, we're using TRs and TDs because we're inside of a table. So we're just changing the wrapping or the packaging around some data from the database. Kind of like if you're going to a birthday party, back when we could actually see people in person, right? You buy a gift, there's different ways you can wrap or package that gift. You could put it in a bag, you could wrap it in newspaper, you could buy wrapping paper, you could put it in a gift box. Still the same item inside, but we have different ways to package or present it. So this is the same when we're building dynamic web content. We query the database and get some data, and then we determine what kind of HTML formatting are we going to use with that data on a particular page. How do we want to package it or present it? Yes, it is. Thank you, Tyler. Should be. Nice catch. So now when I refresh, we've now got a grid of dynamic data. And every time we load this page, it's giving us a current snapshot as to what's in the database. So if I go and add a new artist through my artist details form and refresh my page, my new artist should show up. So I can try, just go here. So if I go to my artist details, I'll maybe add one more artist, which is saved. If I hit refresh, my data is now up to date. Okay, so we're using a form and PHP code to save to the database, and we're using HTML and PHP and a little bit of CSS to dynamically display the content. Okay, I will push this file to Git as well. Actually, I'm going to add one more class, one more CSS feature up here in the table tag. There's also a Bootstrap class called table striped. This will alternate the background colors of the rows with table-striped. So by adding that, I get this effect. So my table's a little easier to read with the alternating background colors. And again, you could customize this. You could change the colors and stuff. This will be good enough for our purposes. So that's right in the class definition of table. Okay, so that code's been uploaded for you as well. So we're going to build tables. You know, all the things we've done today, this is the three main things we do with a list of data in web pages. We present them as a grid. We often present data in a drop-down query results, or we create some kind of list, unordered list. These are the three most common ways that we would present a list of data that we select from a database. Are there any questions about what we've done? A lot of the code is repetitive, which is good. We'll make it easier to learn. We're not going to create, yes, sure. So these are all the pages. We're going to create one other simple page today. I want to do two things. Number one is I want to migrate this stuff over to AWS. So we have a database on AWS, but we don't have an artists table and we don't have a genres table. So I want to create those things. I want to change the database connection to use the AWS database, and then I want to move this database connection into a separate file. So we don't have to repeat it in every page. I know someone was asking about that earlier. This is not, yeah, okay, that's great. Thanks, Alex. Good. So let's do that. We're going to connect to our AWS database. We're going to rerun the create table scripts. And then we're going to modify our application to use AWS. And then we're also going to look at hosting it. So we probably need about 20 minutes. We should wrap up today around 2 o'clock because I also want to then assign lab 1 to you. So for starters, I'm going to close my connection here to my local database. So I'll just click on File, Close Connection tab. I'm going to click on my AWS connection. And bear with me, I will give you everything you need here. I've already got a genres table, so that's going to be a problem. I'll figure that out. Okay, first thing you need to do is you need to run a use command. So run use and put in your database name here. If you're not able to connect right now, you can always try it later. I'm recording this, so you can always try it and see if you can connect later. Alessio, you can also send me your credentials and I'll see if I can connect with them. So first thing we're going to do is run the use command to make sure you put in your AWS. Your database name and your username is the same. So just run the use command and click. Yes, that would be the other thing you could do. You could double click inside a scheme as yes, Tyler. That works as well. I need to drop. So here's the script you're going to run. I'll put it all together. And I will put it in the chat. So first, we're going to recreate the genres table. So we're going to paste in this command to create the genres table. And then we're also going to run the other SQL script. We don't need to drop the artist table because we don't have it. So this is the script you need. So after you've run the use command, you're going to create the genres table and the artist table. and then alter the table. So I'm just going to run this whole thing. I already have a genres table, which is fine. I get an error, but you don't. So now we've got 2 empty tables in our database. I now want to go back to my web application. I'm going to create a single file with my AWS database connection, and then we're just going to link that file in to all our pages. So that way our database credential is not repeated over and over again. So you could run the use or double click your schema, create the genres table, create the artists table. Okay. We'll go back to our code editor. I'm going to make a new file here called db.php. It only needs an opening tag. I don't exactly know why. We don't have to put, so this will be our global DB connection for all pages. And I'm going to use my AWS credentials for this. So you'll need that email with your username and password. Again, we're using MySQL, but this time the host is 172.31.22.43. And put in your AWS database name. It's typically your first name and then your student number. Then you're going to put in your username, which again should be the same. I believe it's the same as your database name. And lastly, you need your AWS password. We'll also enable the PDO debugging. So I'll add the set attribute. Yes, Raj, but I mean, if somebody goes, you all have your own database. So I don't really have any choice. I can't show you how to do this otherwise. So I've put in my AWS credentials and turned on the debugging. I'm now going to have to open up each of the pages we've been working on. We want to replace the existing database connection in each of those pages by including this file. So I'm going to go to artist details first. Sorry, I'll leave this up. You'll put your password here. So PHP has a simple include function that we can use. Actually, there's one called include and there's one called require. We're going to use the require function. Because any page that needs the database, this file is not really optional, it's necessary. Okay, so same connection, but we're using the AWS credentials now. We'll start in artist details, and I'm going to replace line 21. Where we have this connection, I'm now just going to use the require function. So this stores our connection globally. I don't need to repeat it. So for example, if we're changing servers or we change the password, we now can just modify it in one file. So I'm going to save this file. I'm going to copy it to all of the other files, wherever we've got a reference to our database. So here on my save artists, I've got my local database connection with error handling. I'm just going to replace it with our require function. I'll do the same thing in all of the other files. So this way our credentials are only stored one time globally. We don't want them repeated in page after page. So now in my artist file, again, we'll just require the database. So we declare that DB variable in here, but we can use it because these files are joined together. No, Raj, it doesn't. I don't know why, but it's not necessary because there's no other code in it. It's only PHP. My save page, same thing, as well as genres and genre details. Basically, every page except the home page right now, every page is using the database. So wherever you've got a database connection, we're just going to substitute in that require command. Genre details doesn't need it. So check all your files. Anywhere we're using the database, we are going to use that require instead. So now we'll want to right? If I refresh my page now, no, you shouldn't put it in. Don't require the database. Well, save genre does need it. Save genre is going to save to the database. So absolutely, it's got to go in here. Genre details doesn't need it because that's just a form right now. It's just HTML. But save genre, absolutely, it's required. Any save page is going to need the database. So if I refresh my artist list now, now it's empty because it's no longer connecting to my local database. It's now connected to AWS. And my AWS, there's no records in there. So what I need, same here, if I go to, so what we're going to need to do is repopulate now, first the genres, and then the artists. Now, I already have, I'm using a genres table in my morning class, so I'm going to have some genres that are music and some that are movies. Your table will be empty. So if you go to genres right now, I've got movie genres. So I'm going to have both in my database. Your genres page should be empty right now. So we're going to use our form to repopulate alternative rock and jazz. Yes, Dominic, we can. The instructions are on D2L. There's a text file under tools and resources with the step-by-step instructions. So you'll have that also as a reference in the future. Okay, so those instructions are under tools and resources. There's a text file right here. So you can always reference that. So now I've got my movie genres from my morning class and my music genres. And now I should be able to go and add some artists. I don't have to even put them in the same order. I'll just fill out my artist details a bunch of times. And now I've got data that's stored in AWS. No, I don't. So my pages are running locally in my local Apache web server, but the data now lives on the AWS database. So now I also want to publish my web application to the AWS server using Filezilla, so I can run this application on the internet. Now the instructions for this are also here, connecting to the web server instructions. I know Dave Rubeck, but do I listen to him? No, I don't. Now, we'll need to set up our AWS credentials. You probably have it in Filezilla already, but you're just going to have to create it with your new password. So if you open up Filezilla, you probably have an AWS connection here from last semester. So if you want to put in your updated password for Filezilla, you just go to Site Manager. And if you click on the connection that you probably already have from last term, you can just update your password here. If you need to set it up from the beginning, the instructions are on D2L. And when you connect to the web server, you're going to see a public underscore HTML. Remember, all your files have to go in here or you can't browse to them. Anything outside of here is not public. So I'm going to open up my public folder, and then my PHP tunes application is here. It's under C and XAMPP and docs, htdocs. So you can browse to it, C, XAMPP, htdocs. And I'm just going to upload my whole PHP tunes folder. And once this is done, I should be able to load the website from the AWS server. Again, so the instructions for connecting both to the web server in Filezilla and to the MySQL server in Workbench, you can find both those on D2L under useful links and resources. So this is working locally. How do I try this from the web server? I use lamp.computerstudies as the domain, and then the tilde character and my username, and then PHP tunes. So your site, I'll just put it in the chat. Your link would be the same. You would just replace Rich100 with your own username. And now I could try this out. So here's my artist page. Dominic, make sure it's accurate. Double check it. If you're sure it's right, you may have to email CS Tech and tell them your password's not working. They might need to reset it. Unfortunately, I don't have access to do it. I'm going to go to Artist Details, and I'll try my form out here. So I can go back, add a couple more artists. It's cstech@georgiancollege.ca. So now my pages are working. I can add and read data using the web server. So I'm not going to use the local database anymore. we're going to use the AWS database exclusively going forward. I'm going to give you, I want to go over your lab briefly as well. And then I can stay in the, that'll be it for today, but I will stay in the WebEx room if anybody needs some help. So your lab, this is useful. Okay, so for your lab, you need to upload 2 files. You need one PHP page called lab1. You also need to put in a text file with the link to your live page on AWS. You do have to publish the file. Yes, that's correct. So here's what you have to do. Make sure you're connected to the VPN. Open MySQL Workbench, connect to your AWS database. You're going to run the following command. Use, and you'll substitute your DB name. And you're going to create a table called relatives. And then for each member of your nuclear family or your household, and include yourself, you can also include grandparents and pets, you're going to execute the following command directly in Workbench. Insert into relatives, name, age, and occupation, and put in each person or pet's name, age, and occupation. So you might insert, 4 or 5, or if you live in a really big family, more lines. You just paste this into Workbench and run it. You don't need a form. You're then going to build a page called Lab1 that selects all the relatives in your database and displays them in an HTML table with 3 columns. So the first column will be the name, second column age, third column occupation. So it will look pretty similar to this page, except there will be 3 columns instead of 2. And then you'll publish it here in a folder called Comp1006 lab1.php. So you'll upload the PHP file to D2L, as well as you'll have to put your link to it in a text file. So I can actually click the link and load the page in my browser. Okay? This is due Sunday night at midnight.